Morning, church. Morning. And a very, very blessed and happy Sabbath and a New Year. Happy New Year to you. I just want to begin this morning with a question. What would you do if you knew that you had only one more day to live? What would you do if you knew that you had only one more day to live? Well, for me, the most pressing question is, what should I do when I have only got 15 minutes to preach a 30-minute sermon? On the night before Jesus was crucified, this is what he did. He gathered his disciples for a final meal together. How many of you like eating? How many of you like to be invited out for a meal? Yes, everybody. Tosi is the only one, the brave one who put up their hand. I think the rest of you, all of us, all right, love to be invited out for a meal. And it was so that Jesus gathered his disciples for a final meal. Because it would be their last time together before he will be taken away by the Jewish and Roman authorities to be crucified. As we think about this, Jesus, during the meal, said to his disciples in Luke chapter 22, verse 19, "Then Jesus took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them, and said, 'This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" In the context of his words, actually Jesus was sharing a meal with his disciples, and this meal was the Passover meal. Now, for those who are not familiar with what Passover means, it just comes from the word pass and over, these two words. This meal, or this Passover meal, was to commemorate the deliverance of the children of Israel from Egyptian bondage. And on the night before their deliverance, God had commanded the children of Israel through Moses to sacrifice a lamb, an unblemished lamb, and as a result of that sacrificial lamb, to take the blood of the lamb and to put it on their doorposts and their lintel, okay, the top and the side. And they were supposed to also have a meal of bitter herbs, and of course, a meal of the sacrificed lamb. You know, when we think about meals, we think of many, many occasions that we celebrate when we have a meal. One of the occasion that is coming upon us very soon is the Chinese Lunar Year, right? Chinese New Year. And what do families have for Chinese Lunar Year? Their reunion dinner. Am I right? Okay, I don't know about other parts, but this is what the Chinese people do. And when I think of the Passover and the Chinese Lunar Year, I remember one message that I heard about this person. He said when the Chinese, they celebrate the Chinese New Year, they always welcome the New Year by the color what? What color is that? Red, okay? Red prosperity. And what do? In front of their houses, on the door, they will put this red curtain. You know the Ang Chai, is that? They put this red curtain, along the doorposts, on top of the lintels, and then come down the other side. And it reminds me of the children of Israel. God commanded them when they were to be delivered to what? Apply the blood on their doorposts, and maybe it has some significance. And as I think of it, it probably has, And God, through the Lord Jesus Christ, celebrated his meal, this last meal with his disciples, using a very, very common things that are very common to us. But before I move on, I would like you to notice what the words of Jesus in Luke chapter 22, verse 19, or perhaps we should flash the scripture reading on our board again here, right in front of the screen. Okay, the words of the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, where he mentioned in beginning from verse 23, for I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus on the same night in which he was betrayed took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "Take, eat. This is my body, which is broken for you, and do this is what? In what? Remembrance of me." That's the first remembrance there. Next verse. In the same manner, he also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." So Jesus left these emblems of the bread and of the wine so that his disciples can remember him. Every time when they sit down and have this meal, they would what? Remember him. But remember him for what? Well, the word remember, in remembrance there, the Greek word actually not only means to recall something or someone from the past. Okay, that's not only the meaning of the word remember. It also means to make real, to make contemporary the reality of the deed, like as though it has come back alive when you remember and you recall that incident. In this case, it is not only remembering the words of Jesus, but it's also remembering the life, the death, the deeds, and everything that Jesus did so that he could bring life to us. You know, as we think of ourselves as human beings, we think we are actually defined by time. All of us have a past. All of us are living in the present. And we do not know what the future is. Right? The past, the present, and the future. And our lives actually are defined by a dash. If you go to the graveyard and you see the tombstones, you know, this person lived from what year to what year. And in between the 2 years, there's a dash. That's our life. Okay? That's our life on earth. But in recalling, asking us to remember what Jesus did for us, Jesus is actually telling us about our past, telling us about our present, and telling us about the future. In the last verse, verse 26 there, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's what? Death till he comes." As often as you eat, that means in the present time as you do it, you will remember what Jesus did for you in the past, as well as you proclaim the Lord's death, okay? Till when? He comes in the future. So you see the past, the present, and the future is in that last verse. What did Jesus do for us in the past? He redeemed us. And today, he is still redeeming us. And we shall be redeemed fully when he comes. Jesus Christ, the Bible says, is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Talking about the past, the present, and the future. Somebody said, today was the tomorrow that you thought about yesterday. Am I right? It says today was the tomorrow you thought about yesterday. Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. In remembrance of me. So in order for us to help us to remember, I'm getting on in years, and I know that I'm beginning to, forget a lot of things, and that is why I need my wife around to remind me at times. But I think all of us go through that. In order for us to help us to remember, Jesus chose two symbols, the symbols of the bread and the wine or the juice. And these are the simplest elements. And when you think of it, if you want to survive in this world, do you really need to have money? Yes, but do you have all the money in the world, but your money can't buy anything? Is your money worth anything to you? No. If you have a piece of land and you plant vegetables and you plant fruits, okay, and you plant edible things on the land, is that enough to survive? To keep you to keep you going? I think that's what basically it's all about. I remember the incident when Indonesia had their crisis, their racial crisis, and a lot of Christians were persecuted. And many of these people who started these riots, okay, they were very, very unhappy because they felt they were deprived of many things. And in fact, they were. They had no food to eat, they had no jobs, all right? And in the end, what happened? They still have to fill in their empty stomachs. And that's what they did. But those people who had their own land, okay, those people who were able to go and fish in the sea, those people who didn't have much money, but they had enough to eat, they plant their own rice, there was these places, they did not have any problem at all, especially places where these people live. So in the same way, Jesus used this simple illustration of the wine and the bread for us to remember Him, what He did for us. I once attended a funeral during my college days. There was this student who died in a bike accident back in his hometown. He was a Christian, and we Christians in the college decided to have a memorial service for him, even though, we did not have, his casket wasn't there, but we in the campus decided to have a memorial service for him. And while the funeral was being held over in another state that is in his hometown, we had a special memorial service in the college. And I remember the time when all of us, friends who were close to him, instead of the place where they put the casket, there were photos, there were class assignments, there was even a football, and there was a jacket, and assortment of things there. And why were these things in front during the memorial service? Well, one by one, these people came and they started to recollect the instances of love and devotion about this young man, about this person, our colleague who died. And sometimes also this words of reflection was not only solemn and sad, but at the same time also there were stories of pranks, the jokes that they played on him and he played on them. And there wasn't, I believe at that moment, an unmoved heart in that place. And there was laughter mixed with tears, there was laughter mixed with smiles, and at the same time there were quivering lips. Then it dawned on me that when Jesus, He gave us these symbols of the bread and the wine, He wanted us to remember what He did for us. And not only to remember what He did for us, but He wants us to celebrate what He did for us. I think funerals is not only a time to pay our respects to the late deceased person, but more so to celebrate the life that God has given to us from Him. And that is what I believe Jesus wants us to remember, that this is actually a solemn occasion, but at the same time, there is a joy in our hearts that we can celebrate what Jesus had done for us. Not what we did to Him, not what we did for Him, but what He did for us. And one of the ways in which we can remember this is whenever we partake of this bread and wine, is to remember on that night, Jesus became the bread through His broken body for us. Jesus became the wine through the blood that He shed for us. Well, if there's one thought that we should bring together with us to remember what Jesus had done for us is this. It's about a story. On the early morning of November 12, 1986, this young teenager by the name of Jamie Estrap was traveling from her home to work in the morning shift of the restaurant. And this restaurant was situated by the interstate, by the highway. As she rounded the last curve before she would turn into the frontage of the restaurant, a car coming into a lane at over 90 miles per hour crashed into her. But before the car could crash, she swerved and the car made contact with her on the driver's side. She was struck on the driver's side, and this young lady was killed instantly. The driver of the speeding vehicle, his name was Lucas Jones. He was going home from an all-night party with his friends. As you know, and as you have guessed, he was drunk. While thrown out from his car at the point of impact, he walked away from the accident with only bruises and a broken arm. Lucas was not a bad 17-year-old. In fact, he was an honor roll student in his school. He, on that night, simply had too many beers and should have not been driving a car. He made a tragic mistake. So at his trial, witnesses testified of Lucas' achievements in the classroom, his service to the community, his kind heart, his church involvement. But the prosecuting attorney reminded the court that while all of these facts about Lucas may be true, he nevertheless drove a car that exceeded the speed limit while intoxicated and took the life of an innocent victim. Punishment was needed. The court waited in anticipation for the judge's verdict in the case, and when the judge spoke, he said to a remorseful Lucas Jones, "Lucas, as the witnesses have testified, you are a decent young man. And from your own statement, I realize that you're truly sorry for the crime that you have committed. I want to believe that, as you say, you will never touch alcohol again. But," there was a long pause, "a young innocent girl is dead because of your irresponsibility, and nothing you can do will bring her back to life. Her friends and family mourn her loss. I, therefore, sentence you to 2 years in the juvenile center. Since you have already spent 16 months, the balance of the 8 months will be spent in the juvenile center. You will only spend 8 months in the juvenile center." And with that, a gasp came over the courtroom from Jamie's family, thinking that the sentence was too lenient and not severe enough. And the judge went on, "For the rest of your natural life, every year on November 12th, you are to go to the scene of the accident where you plowed into Jamie's car and think about your actions. So I don't want you to ever forget what you have done. I want you to recall your poor judgment, the life that was taken, and your part in it." And I think there's nothing more tragic and horrible than an innocent victim killed by a drunken driver. But my dear friends, we are no different than Lucas Jones. We took the life of Jesus. It was our sin that nailed him to the cross. He was an innocent victim. He did not deserve to die. We did. But he took our place. And so that we will never forget, we gather at the table each quarter to remember him. We taste the bread and sip from the cup to recall the life that was taken, the sacrifice that was made, and our part in the tragedy. These are the things we need not forget. These are the things that Jesus has said. Do this in remembrance of me.